right.
No, it's the most tough.
If we're all ready, 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is acceptance of minutes. Is there a motion?
Do you have the date up?
Oh, I don't have the date. Colleen, do you have the date?
The 13th and 19th of November.
A motion to approve the minutes of the 13th and the 19th of November.
Second.
Discussion? Motion is made and seconded. All in favor? That's 4-0. Chairman's report, just a couple quick things. Just report that November 30th, Bob, Pete, and I attended the town FinCom meeting to talk about our request for the free cash in the amount of $150,000 to cover technology infrastructure upgrades at Green Meadow, Fowler, and the new Project Lead the Way program for grades K through 8. FinCom was very supportive. They had a lot of great questions, so we'll definitely have a good idea of how to sort of make our presentation for town meeting, I think, and answer some of the easy questions and sort of the clear-cut questions we should expect, but they ended up being completely supportive, so that was time well spent to go over and talk with those folks, so that is good. So we'll next see that on the January 11th town meeting in Maynard, so if we don't have that in our schedule, we should plan to be there as a school committee and show our support. We'll figure out who wants to present, or if it might be the town that presents it, because it's technically a Board of Selectmen article, but we'll figure all that out before the next meeting. So that was an excellent use of time. The same night, Jennifer had her strategic planning meeting, and that was very well attended. I've heard great feedback, and I've passed that along to the administration. So you can give an update on that when you're ready, whichever meeting, but it was just very well attended, very great response from the community. We saw folks from all 3 schools. We saw folks from Green Meadow and Fowler administration were there this time, which was great. So we're really getting some really great attendance at some of these things. So the outreach is really working and very much appreciated. So thank you for getting that done. We've got the Beacon Santa Telethon on December 11th, run by the WAVM program. For anyone not familiar, it's fundraising. It benefits lots of needy families in the surrounding area as well as Maynard. And it's actually their 50th anniversary, which I didn't know, but that's pretty amazing. So 50 years, that kind of blew me away. So they're approaching the $1 million in funds raised mark. So that's really exciting. So that's on, the kickoff is Friday, December 11th at 8 p.m. for anyone who wants to pop over. And lastly, I just wanted to sort of say great job during the Green Meadow gas leak or smell of gas incident. I thought it was really well handled as far as the communication out to the community and the parents, and what could have been a very, touch and go or very nerve-wracking situation seemed to really be handled very well. I didn't see any negative feedback from parents, and everyone seemed pretty well. The kids were great, and so good job. Kudos to everyone involved in that. So that's it for me for tonight. I'll turn it over to Bob for superintendent's report.
So I also want to acknowledge some of the things you talked about as far as the concern about the gas smell at Green Meadow. I want to also compliment the teachers, some of whom are here, the students, the staff at Green Meadow as well at Fowler. Because from what I understand, Fowler actually was very accommodating, sent them up, set the whole Green Meadow school up in the great room, the assembly hall, and actually also Aaron, who was a huge help and a huge person who actually helped communicate to me what the facts were as they were going down. So I knew exactly where we stood and what the appropriate measures were. But specifically also our assistant principal, Deborah Bresnick, did a really great job. She was running back and forth from school to Aaron to all over, just trying to make sure she was making the right decisions. And of course, we erred on the side of caution, but it turned out to be a minimal issue. So thanks and kudos to everybody involved. And I also want to touch base on the visiting and strategic planning. That was really exciting. And as a first step, we've brought that information to the MLT to share with them all the information we got from the community. Next steps are going to be also include working on, the committee suggested that we tie together all of the thoughts that were brought together, and we're also going to go to faculty meetings and bring it to teachers And so there's a lot of constituents that need to get involved in this, and it's still an ongoing process, and it's going to take a while to get to the end, but it's a great process, and we're doing a really good job. So kudos to Jennifer for leading it and doing a great job. Also, last week we received preliminary accountability data, so it's not final, so we really can't talk about it yet, but we, as far as district level data, but we were very excited by the preliminary, what it looks like, so we can't wait until we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And we will, I think, pretty soon, I think sometime either this week or next week, the state will make it official data, and then we can talk about it. And I do believe that the student results, individual results came in, so I'm not sure if the principals have already sent them out, but I think sometime this week or beginning of next week, they were going to be sending out, so parents may see the individual student results from their state assessments coming out very soon.
So that comes through the school and then home, or it
Yes,
goes?
it all comes to my office, then the individual student reports go to the principals, and the principals send them out to the parents. So that's the process. So just wanted everybody to know there's some pretty exciting, I think, exciting news and positive results. So that's really great. Yesterday, there was great educational news at the national level. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a bipartisan bicameral bill entitled Every Child Succeeds Act for a comprehensive ESEA reauthorization, and it's going to be going before the Senate for a vote soon. The National Superintendents Association, AASA, actually provided us with several documents that I've shared with school committee members, including a summary overview, a call to action, a list of our representatives and senators, so that if we agree after we review what ESSA stands for, then we really should be calling our senators, because it passed overwhelmingly at the House. If it passes the Senate, then we will have a lot more flexibility. I actually printed up, there was a commissioner, the Secretary of Education sent out a parent's note, too. I don't know if we made extra copies, Colleen, of it?
Yeah,
They're in the back of what the changes mean, and it does mean a lot of flexibility for the states, a lot less of the rigid accountability provisions that No Child Left Behind had in it. It excludes a lot of the portability provisions, which was actually taking away money from the schools who need it the most. It's still going to focus on improving the lowest 5% of schools that need help and need extra financial support. And it has a lot of really neat incentives in there, and even promotes equity in state funding, which is really interesting. So we'll see. It looks very positive. It was already passed overwhelmingly by the House, and I would urge everybody to contact your senators, and there's a list here of senators, if you want to, our Mass senators, to tell them, if you like what you see, we're happy with what we saw the House push through, and we'd really like the Senate to push it through, because No Child Left Behind has some inherent flaws. I think we can all agree on that. So if anybody wants to do some reading, there's some, a general information there, and I think I printed a 40-page document for the school committee that has a lot more of the details. So I think that's really exciting. And this week, we actually have a pleasant surprise. Janelle Carr, who was our student representative last year, we were just notified that she'll be coming and being our student representative. So what I'd like to do, because we didn't have her on the agenda, is have her finish up the superintendent's report and maybe just tell us, if you'd like to add what's going on, we'd appreciate hearing about it. And if you could finish up my report for me. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Okay, so before we went off for Thanksgiving break, we had Spirit Week, which is always a loved event at the high school. It's really fun for all the kids because everyone can get involved and really just get involved with their grade student government, and just the whole school comes together for it, so it's a fun thing to do. And then also, I know that fall sports are over, and winter sports are now starting. I know the sports banquet was last night, and I heard it went very well. And then the chorus and the band are having their concert next Wednesday at the high school, so we're all rehearsing for that. But that's all.
Fantastic. We look forward to seeing you at future meetings.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back. Anything else?
That's it, for the superintendent's report.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is citizen comments. We try to make sure we provide opportunity early and late in the meeting if anyone has something they want to comment on that's not on the agenda. So if anyone has anything. All right. Next is Green Meadow Playground.
So I know, I don't know if you want to wait until Leslie gets here. Tom Hesbeck is here, who's our liaison with the Community Preservation Committee. And I don't know if you want to wait and,
We can take
It's up
things
to
out of
you.
order if you want to wait a little bit.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to wait until I know she has some prepared notes.
Okay. Is it okay if we take things out of order? Everyone okay with that? So the next update, so next item, no problem. So item 6 is the Mask Conference Update Report.
so, Bethlyn, I don't know if you want to lead off. Bethlyn and I were fortunate to be able to go to the Mask Conference, which is our associations for school committees and superintendents. So, I don't know if you want to lead off with some of the information you have, and
Yeah, well, first, we'll say that we saw a lot of districts in the area there, met a bunch of people from all over, Hudson, Sudbury, Plymouth, Newton, or some that I remember distinctly talking to, and I know that, Bob introduced me to a lot of people. But it was neat, there were a bunch of people that had their whole school committee there with them. And there was a lot of energy at the meeting. It was just a lot of different things to attend and see, which was really nice. So it's kind of, it was exciting to be able to see it and to be able to be a part of it and get some ideas. So there were workshops, they have keynote speakers, they have plenary presentations, and we got books that I would like to hand out to the school committee. They were free at one of the, just to be clear, at one of the dinner sessions, they had a speaker, and it was scholastic. So they have books. I have extras if anyone would like them. It's Open a World of Paso, Real Stories about the Joy and Power of Reading. So,
I've got mine.
Okay.
do it.
I got mine.
Has a copy,
Yeah.
and we'll favor the best if anyone
Thank
else
you.
wants
Maybe
some.
Jen might want to give one to our literacy coaches.
And then I've got more, because we grabbed them off the seats, but didn't show up. It's like, oh, we can give these to people in the packet. So there you have it. You're welcome. I haven't gotten to look at my copy yet, but I do have it on the dresser at the ready. So I don't know, Bob, do you want to just say something about overall, and then we can talk a little bit about what we saw?
Yeah, this was my first chance to go to it, and it was really interesting for me because I do go to a lot of superintendent's conferences, but to go to a joint superintendent school committee conference was really empowering. It also helped me see a school committee perspective that I don't necessarily always see, and that was great. You know, it helped me to understand the stresses that you're under as school committee members at some of these workshops that we attended. So it was really exciting. And I actually, one of the ones that I attended, I've just handed this out to you, was Managing Your Message and a Guide to Working Effectively with the Media, Interview Tips and Strategies for Communicating with Constituents. So I thought this worksheet was really good, and I was able to get a couple of extras for everybody as well. So I think what we have a couple of workshops that really, we thought were pretty impressive. So I'll start off. One of them was Bringing Global Citizenship to Local Middle High Schools, and that presentation was from one of our communities that's in the Aspet Valley Collaborative, Berlin-Boylston. And it's really very similar to the initiatives we've been doing with our sister schools in China that we're trying to develop, and they're having some of the struggles we're having. We're trying to develop them, but they also had some neat ideas. One of the things we've been trying to do is do some summer programs or for a short term for foreign exchange students to come over. They actually had a vendor that they used or that they were planning on using, but we learned about something that's going to give us a tip and help us provide better programs for our foreign exchange program. So that was really, and the nice thing about this was that a lot of the presentations were were from small districts like ours. Berlin-Boylston's a small district like us, so if they can do it, we can do it. You know, some of the presentations were by big city districts, and you learned something from them, but it was really nice that a lot of them were from districts our size.
Yeah, I would say too about that, they said, they talked about need as they're building their foreign exchange program, and kids being able to go over and have it, and the ways that they deal with being able to fund kids, and it was just being able to have that opportunity, so it's available to all. And it was on everyone's mind, and it's definitely, you know, Bob and I were whispering about it, and it's definitely on our minds as well. So it was nice to see that they were finding ways to make that happen, and it was on their minds. So it was just reassuring that we'll be able to do the same.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing how common the concerns are. But that's what's nice about going to this is some of the stuff we struggle with as a school committee and administration, everybody else is struggling with it. So you hear their ideas and you can share your ideas. The next one we went to was Future Search and engaging the community for vision, commitment, and action. And that one, they actually described a process that the town Leicester, if I pronounce that correctly, went through. And it's very similar to what we're doing with our visioning and you know, the activities that we're doing. So, you know, we learned how they did it, and they actually used a vendor. But I think what we're doing is very similar, and so, you know, again, we learned some ideas, but I think it was definitely worthwhile seeing, and they're another small community like us.
And they had a brochure that was hot off the press that I thought might be useful for us in getting ideas for how, as we're talking about, you know, how do we market what we offer? There's so many good things going on. We're just moving forward and doing and working to do more. And how do we really play those to our strengths? And as we're developing the vision, then this kind of was a nice example of ways to be able to put that into something that you can hand to people for them to understand what we're up to. So I wanted to pass that around.
That's great.
Anyone is welcome to see it. I only have one copy. But in any case, so it was neat to hear the process. It was very similar as far as really trying to engage people and stimulate conversation and build up of the strengths of their smaller district as well, and to be able to move forward and everyone, it sounds like they had a really positive experience just as we've been having.
So a lot of the workshops we both were so interested in, we went together, which was good because then you can kind of, if I miss something, Bethlehem could pick it up and vice versa. There was a couple that we're going to talk about where we went individually because there was too many good ideas. We just figured if we both separate, at least we can bring back. So the next one that I saw was Global STEM Education Programs, Policy, Funding, Outcomes, Is Your District Ready? And this was a really exciting presentation for me because it merged two topics that I'm passionate about, STEM and global learning. The two districts that were presenting were Dennis Yarmouth and Blackstone Valley Regional Technical School. And they have been doing this great model for quite a while now, so they have a successful model, and they work with a consultant called the Global STEM Center, who connects them with international partners. But one of the struggles we've been having with our international program is travel, right? Some of it is how do we get, we talked about how do all kids have opportunities to have international programs. This program, I believe, was for sophomores in one school and sophomores and juniors for other, and it was a technology class, but they had the big screen monitors and Skyping, and kids were working on projects together with international partners through Skyping. So they didn't even have to get together to work on projects together. And we know that the workforce, there are people now who have jobs where they're on their computer talking with people across the world and doing projects together that way. So to me, this is a very exciting prospect for us to be looking into as to how we can do global learning with the technology that we have right in our own building. So it was really an exciting possibility, and I'm looking forward to doing some more digging and learning and hopefully bringing that back to the school committee at some point and talking about it and seeing how we can do that.
That's great.
It was thrilling.
That
Yeah.
sounds really great.
And by the way, like their international partners, so they had 8 different countries going at once. So they had kids from 8 different countries working together on one project, which is pretty neat.
That's amazing. That's fantastic.
So I know another one that you went to, Bethlehem, was cost savings and efficiencies.
Yes. and I wish I'd been in yours. It was bad. It was more about, it was really about two different districts that had done some work to rehab their buildings and make sure that they were at the level they needed to be. And one of them was, I thought would be of most interest, was in Plymouth. They had used solar panels. They ended up getting solar panels, but it was interesting, and they plotted the cost savings, which is obvious they were going to having them over time. But it's pretty significant, and at the same time, it was a very arduous process that they had to go through, and it took years and years. So I'm not sure there was a lot of take home, except maybe, unless we really feel strongly about that, we might not per se want to go down that road. So.
Well, I know Justin feels strongly about it, so we
Yeah,
may still be trying to go down that road.
I think I gave you the information.
Yeah.
We can get him all the information if he's interested in continuing to look at it, for sure.
Why, can you summarize why it's so?
Well, they had to get town funding, so they had to go to the town several times in order to get funding, and they had to work with the town, and they also had to they had to have the land, which they happen to have down there to be able to do it. There are a couple ways that you can do it. And then there were, there were a series of town meetings in order, and the contractor part had to go through a bunch of iterations, and there was a lot of legalities to make sure we're taken care of. And so I can definitely give you the blow by blow if you want it. I didn't fully follow it, except to recognize that they said it was a very arduous process. And even now, they have to have people in place because there's so many, there's a lot of follow-up with the way that you have to manage the cost savings. To get the cost savings, you have to manage the financials, and whoever it was, one of the energy companies, isn't really invested in making sure that it gets taken care of, so you have to have someone on staff doing that. They had a lot of legal counsel, and then the staff, it was just a lot. So I am happy to further find details if people would like follow-up and be able to present it further later and work with Justin on that. But, yeah.
So, and then the next one was on cultural proficiency, and cultural proficiency is kind of a new term that we're learning about and it's about communicating and respecting people's differences, and culture isn't just race and religion, it includes family values, norms, and a whole bunch of other things that we really, it's about understanding each constituent from their perspective so that we can improve trust and support each other. And this is an important initiative that we've already begun receiving some professional development, the administrative team has, and some teachers through the Aspet Valley Collaborative. They had offered it, and I know Principal Mila and a few teachers I think went. They are very excited about it, and it's likely to be one of those tools that we're going to be looking at in the pillars that we talked about at our visioning session around meeting all student needs. I think this might be a really good initiative because the teachers and principals already have gone to some PD and liked it. So I found it was really interesting to listen to it. I don't know what you took away.
Well, so my background is in social work and public health, so we focus a lot on cultural proficiency, so it wasn't unusual in that way for me, but what was unusual is the presenter, he just had volunteers in the audience get up and describe points in their school career, and I missed exactly how he framed it, but it was essentially how they got labeled or misunderstood and the effect that had on their education. And every single person had a story to tell. So it was really fascinating to see how it's really, how do you take the person in front of you and understand who they are and see them and find the resources you need to be able to do that when you need to do it. So that, and also the speaker, I forget his name, but he had grown up in New York City, and his guidance counselor told him not to bother. He was African American. His guidance counselor told him not to bother applying to college. And his mom heard that, and she was like, "What?" So she was a single mom who went with him on the bus and went to the guidance counselor and had a talking to the guidance counselor, and he applied and got into college, and he's a PhD.
Yeah.
And to think of people that don't have that advocate for them to help them along the way, and who's going to be that, and so that's something I think that we can have in mind the Maynard advantage is we all smaller, so hopefully kids don't fall through the cracks, but how do you be with each person and each student in front of you, and each educator, each person that's a part of the picture, everyone, in their own way, so.
Yeah, and when the presenter did that, he did that with school committee members and administrators, all getting up and talking about where they felt they were mislabeled in their education. Some of it was as early as kindergarten, some was as late as college. But everybody had a story to tell. It was really interesting. The next one was advancing social and emotional learning in your community and local developments. And this presentation was good because Maynard was actually recognized by the presenters as leader in this workshop. And they actually gave us this. They only had a couple of copies, so I'll pass that around. And it's social and emotional learning and approaches to play and learning. And those were the two focuses of this conference. Was the session was that we really need to figure out how we can make those sort of things happen. And again, that's part of that pillar that I keep talking about, that I think we're going to be focusing on. The other information we got there was that the Department of Ed will be offering free PD, a 10-hour course on this. And so, and they'll be offering a train-the-trainer model. So this is something we'll be looking for and we'll make use of. And I think it'll really bode well in our visioning and planning. So that was exciting. I don't
Did you
know.
say they highlighted something from Maynard?
They were just saying that I think we had applied for a safe and supportive schools grant, and they were just acknowledging that Maynard was on the forefront in trying to do work in this area,
Oh, that's great.
which is always nice to hear, especially from the Department of Ed.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and they described, they went through a whole process with focus groups with teachers and to really try to understand and capture domains of social emotional learning and really operationalize it so that you know what you're talking about. And then they found ways, they have these guidelines, they didn't call it standards, they're guidelines. They're not being put on anyone. It's not a mandate, but to be able to use this, especially the thing that really struck me is that social emotional learning and development is the strongest predictor of academic performance by 7th grade. Every dollar that goes into social emotional learning has a return of $11. So it's a very important piece of the picture that used to really be, I think, dealt with in kindergarten when you went in and you played for your half day back when we did. And now it's kind of swung the other way, and now they really had to recognize how do we now bring back in that social emotional learning piece. So I really love to see us continue in the inquiry we've been having around that and exploration about how do we really engage that. And as I hear teachers talk about kids, and especially boys too, this is a piece where the focus and being able to get them to pay attention and having trouble, I think that there are pieces of this with the free play and the movement, that the way that they learn, the vestibular functioning that contributes to learning. There's been a lot of work with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation they've done, and I mentioned that at the session, where they're really trying to work with schools to help them to have innovative ways to try to help kids to get little breaks so that they can come back to the school day. Like, you've probably heard of some of these things, yoga or mindfulness practices, but that they're all part of this, they fall under this realm. And that they can help just little breaks, taking a break and doing some sort of mindful practice. Kids are then able to come back and focus in ways that a lot of teachers are like, I wouldn't have thought that would happen if you told me that would happen. But it works. And so I'm looking forward to us continuing to look at that, because it's hard for teachers and it's hard for the kids when they're really little and trying to do this stuff all day. So I'm excited to see how we can, that this is on people's minds, and that we might be able to find ways to really help make that happen more here.
Excellent.
That's great.
The next one was on superintendent evaluation, and the Hudson School District was one of the two districts presenting, and they identified that the timing of the superintendent's evaluation can be determined by the district. It's not set in stone. And in their case, they had a new superintendent, and a new school committee who wanted to understand what was going on as far as strategic planning and those sort of things, kind of like the situation we've been in. And so they went with a January to January model. So just throwing it out there that we haven't actually gotten started on my evaluation process, but maybe a January to January model might work for us like it did for Hudson.
Yeah, and they did have a lot of, on the Mass website, they have, for the conference, they have all the handouts and downloads, and they did really spell out the process. So when it comes time that we can use that as a resource. I think that'll be nice to help us when we're in that process.
And then the last one, Beth Lynn, was one that you attended, and I gave the school committee some more materials. So I don't know if you want to talk to that one. It was less testing and more learning.
Yes, so it was very interesting. I was able to kind of, anyone is welcome if anyone wants to look at this too. But that's for social emotional learning, if you want to grab it and take a look at it. So this was really about trying to look alternative ways to test kids that aren't standardized testing. It's not throwing out standardized testing. It's just trying to come up with some more meaningful ways to balance out the standardized testing and not giving it as much import, because their research, the PARCC, the MCAS, and the SATs only predict about 5 to 18%, depending on the particular test, of college grades, of college performance, how well people do in college. So it clearly isn't it's not measuring and getting at as much as you would hope it would be measuring and getting at, and yet it is very, very much the key thing that we're focusing on. So there are some states that chose New Hampshire, New York, California. They got waivers, federal waivers, so they could do a different form of testing. They formed collaboratives and did a different form of performance-based testing. And that presentation, you guys have a copy of that, so you could see some of what they did. And they actually had like 95% college acceptance rates compared to 63% in New York City for the collaborative. So they had some nice success with what they were doing. So I just thought it was very, very provocative as far as thinking about what things we might be able to do. I'm not saying that we should be doing what New York City is doing per se, but just for thinking about it, especially as we're going towards more inquiry-based, project-based learning, and we're really looking at how we can integrate that. Some of this makes sense. Bob and I were talking about the fact that there are already senior projects that happen as a part of graduation, and that really speaks to some of what they are talking. That's an example of one of the facets is definitely that they were using as their package of performance-based testing and a bunch of these collaboratives that waived out of.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that this new ESSA reauthorization will give the states flexibility, and maybe we'll hear about that flexibility, and maybe those will be options that we can look at. So
Yeah.
it's unfolding, and it's great. I think it's a good time in education to see things moving in a very positive direction. And I think, again, we've been leading it, but we've been leading it in some ways, not, like with the senior projects or the different graduate, we have different tiered levels of graduation by proficiency projects. Whether it's mentoring, whether it's portfolio, whether it's senior project, all the kids do something. And there's, in some of the research you share with us too, they talked about extended learning opportunities and how those can be brought into the school day or into the student's career. And so there's a lot of neat opportunity here, and it's exciting.
It was nice to get to see, and they're trying to have a moratorium on the high stakes testing consequences, not don't do the testing, just let's not have kids not graduate because of their scores on this test for the time being, and look at explore other options. So they're looking at that for Massachusetts, just to be aware if you hear anything about that. And they're also potentially looking to have a collaborative here. I don't know that that's the answer for us, but they're looking to do that too.
So we also heard from speakers. I know this is going on long, but we were so excited. We have a lot to
This is really
share.
interesting. So.
One of them, the first speaker was John Dioria, who is the president of Teachers 21, and he actually was our keynote speaker on our opening day, I think 2 years ago, to help us with using data and, for the whole school system to work on that. So his speech was around the importance of social emotional learning, and he used an example about his fear of swimming and not being able to communicate that to his wife before they went on a scuba trip, and them not understanding each other's cultural. He's a guy from New York City with lots of pavement. He doesn't swim, but she really wanted to go scuba diving, and they didn't communicate well. So she really needed to understand him better, and he really needed to be able to communicate better. So it was really. he's always a great storyteller. So I enjoyed that very much. And again, it's great to see us focusing on social emotional learning. I don't know, do you have any, that was my takeaway from that one.
Yeah, I think it was, you just put it in a nutshell. I think
Okay.
you just did a nice job of just pointing out the need to try to understand what's happening for people. And
Then I'll let you take over the next one, because that was Dr. William Pollack and Dr. Walker, who was the gentleman you talked about, who we saw his workshop, but then we saw him yeah.
So I guess what I took away from that, it was about boys and men and boys and the boy crisis in the classroom. And it was about boys of color, and boys at risk. So it was just, essentially it was boys in general at risk and boys of color are even more at risk, kind of thing. But what was really interesting was, boys are behind them, but how do you measure it for the past 20 years compared to girls? What can we do? One of the speakers, Dr. Pollack, he'll come in and talk to schools, and he is a psychologist, and when he works with schools, he'll make sure one of the things is safety, not bullying, which we're really looking at here, so that's great. Making sure that no boys are falling through the cracks, that there's at least, I learned this also in clinical psychology in college, if a child has at least one adult that they know is looking out after them, then they end up having the resilience to be okay when they grow up. They don't have as many problems, social emotional problems. So they were saying is they would match and put every boy on a list and say who is the adult person in this education system that that boy connects with. And if there wasn't someone, then let's pick someone and make sure that person connects with that boy to make sure that he has someone to connect with and that he doesn't fall through the cracks. And that was one of the strategies that really seemed to work well.
Yeah, great personalization strategy.
Yeah. So I thought it was very interesting, and I think it's something that I would love to at some point see our performance for boys versus girls in Maynard school districts, just to have a sense of how we're doing with that.
Absolutely.
I think because the Maynard advantage of us being smaller, we probably don't have as much of the kinds of issues they were talking about, but still, I just think.
It's worth looking at.
Yeah. So.
All right, the next one, next keynote speaker was Young Zhao, who I've seen several times, and he's a great orator. He'll have you laughing, but a lot of it is so logical and makes sense. The title was World-Class Learners and Entrepreneurial Students, and so coincidentally he has a book, so he's saying, yeah, I'm trying to sell my book, but I also have a million other books I can sell you too. And I've always been impressed by his view of American education and the differences between the China and U.S. systems. He grew up in the China system and then became a professor, and now his children have grown up in the U.S. system, so he can compare both. He says that the progressive education in the U.S. that created all the major patents in the last 100 years was the correct education, and that China is shocked as to why we're trying to replicate their rote learning, test-generated education that they've excelled at for years, but not had all these patents. And so he recommends project-based learning environments, and he uses the same examples of high-tech high that those of us who went to see most likely to succeed. We saw that example. He uses that example in this book. I've read the book. If anybody wants to borrow it, I just tend to write books a lot because sometimes I disagree and sometimes I agree. And some of his observations were kind of one-liners, so I'm just going to use them. The U.S. has been seduced by the wrong measure since No Child Left Behind. Thank goodness we're looking at ESSA. Thank God No Child Left Behind was an unfunded mandate. School committees and local control are important. The opportunities for students, economic opportunities, are in the areas of technology and global learning. We are currently preparing kids not to compete with machines and outsourcing. And he said it's happening in a lot of countries, but people are saying, come to America, we have the best educated bartenders, because our education system isn't preparing kids for life after college. We have a lot of, we know a lot of people have graduated through this Great Recession and not gotten jobs. So anyway, those are my takeaways. Bethlyn, I don't know if you want to add some?
Yeah, well, he was just real funny. But also very poignant and makes some really good points, including, why do we insist on trying to teach our kids to walk in straight lines? How will that be useful in the future? And, what he is essentially saying is personalization and individualization in the economy moving forward. We are going to be seeing that every person can have their niche, because there's going to be the opportunity, as we are able to tailor and individualize things more and more through technology, for people to be able to find their niche and their contribution and be able to give that if we can offer them and build off of the strengths they have. So that was one of the things that he was saying, and that he also said that our kids, U.S. kids, are way more confident. Like the level of a sense of confidence in your abilities is inversely proportionate to your test score. Right? So, and he said, like in China, they're so, not to overgeneralize, but he's from China. He said they're so browbeaten that they don't feel very secure even when they have really high test scores, because they just aren't, that's not, the confidence isn't fostered in them. We see that confidence, America should not exist. Because if you look at our performance scores, why are we still here? Why hasn't anyone invaded us and taken us over? And it's because we are able to innovate. Right. And that comes from that confidence, that there's more to it than that, just that performance, that there's a bigger picture. And so it was very interesting. And again, wouldn't necessarily, that he simplifies in some ways, but he does get at some of the core dynamics going on. So
Yeah, he had some great data and great charts.
Yeah.
And he talked about Gallup's strengths-based education. Why are we trying to teach everybody to be good at everything when people should get good at what they're good at and become excellent at what they're good at and know what kids' strengths are. So that was interesting. So the last thing we have is just that everybody was talking about their books. So in addition to World-Class Learners, he also has a book called Catching Up or Leading the Way that I also had. He also has a book called Never Send a Human to Do a Machine's Job, Correcting the Top 5 Tech Mistakes. And a couple of other books we heard about was The World is Flat by Friedman, and How NASA Builds Teams by Pellerin, and Full Steam Ahead, Unleash the Power of Visioning in Your Company and Life by Blanchard and Stoner. So I thought those are good books just to report out on. I know I'm going to be buying the ones I don't have, and I do have some here if anybody wants to borrow them. And that is our presentation.
Why don't you write a book for us?
Someday. It's going to be called Maynard. The Maynard Advantage. So that's our report for tonight.
That was great. I mean, it sounds like you guys really zeroed in on a lot of things that we've already been sort of starting to talk about, and what we're hearing from the community and the staff. So I think this is, it's really great to just sort of feel like we're heading towards the right things. And I mean,
so I would encourage anyone who can make it next year.
That's great.
Yeah, it really is great to hear what we're doing, the things that we are on, like really thinking about being able to do as a smaller district.
Well, being able to build those relationships with folks from other districts, I think that's just a great way to sort of bounce ideas off each other. And
It is.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with the Marlboro District and learned a lot about their STEM education, because they really are doing a lot with STEM. So there was you do have that opportunity to meet and collaborate.
Network. Fantastic. Any questions Any questions? So if nothing else, I'd say we'd go back to number 5, the Green Meadow Playground discussion. Leslie, Tom, welcome. Aaron, are you here for
Thank you for delaying also.
Aaron, are you here for this, or am I keeping you?
No, yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. And I'm up. I'll look at you through the microphone. Well, thank you again for rearranging the agenda and for giving us an opportunity to come talk about the playground and for waiting for my babysitter to get to our house. I wanted to, first of all, just kind of update people who weren't here. I came last spring, I think it was last winter, last spring, and came and did a full presentation about the Green Meadow Playground. I think most people here are pretty familiar with the project and kind of what's been going on. But just to sort of recap, a couple of years ago, we were asked to start looking at the Green Meadow Playground, not sure that it really meets the needs of the community, not sure it meets the needs of the age of students that we currently have at Green Meadow, that K-3 age group. And we know that the current playground is not usable for, well, this year it's been a really mild fall, but in general, it's often not used from, or not usable from December through even April. It's really kind of a saucer, and we have water that flows downhill and into the saucer and freezes and makes that whole space unusable for several months out of the year. So it's not appropriate for the age students that we have. It's not usable because of drainage and water flow issues, and it's also not accessible to all students, right? So it's not an inclusive, accessible playground. So we started looking at that. We did a community survey. We've talked with parents, we've talked with teachers, we've talked with other faculty and staff in the district about what they would like to see. Do they see the need for improvements in the playground? And then last year we got together, so we have a group of parent volunteers that are really kind of steering the effort, I guess. And then last fall we hosted a spruce up day where we fixed some equipment, we replaced a fence, we got mulch donated, so we were able to kind of update the playground. Did that again in the spring and did some sort of cleanup, and again we're fixing some of the equipment that had broken that we'd fixed in the fall, we had to fix again in the spring, so it's kind of this ongoing cycle of some of the pieces are really starting to fail every few months. So that was through last year. Also last year we applied to the Community Preservation Commission for funding, and they recommended, and it was approved at town meeting last May, $50,000 to hire an architect, to hire an engineer, to start doing some of the designing and studying of the space, and also to remediate some of the drainage, and then also to replace the fence around the playground. So we started that process. We now have an engineering company under contract. They conducted a topographic survey, so we're kind of in the beginning stages of that, kind of phase one of the project, of the studying and the engineering and design components of the project. And now we've gone back to the Community Preservation Commission and asked for the funding for the actual construction part of the project. Even though we're still designing, we're still figuring out exactly what we need. We have a pretty good idea, some good ballpark numbers as far as what we're going to need and what it's going to take to be able to build the playground that we want, that is safe, that is age appropriate, that is usable for more than 3 months of the school year, that and that's accessible to all of our students. While we're doing that, we're also working with the architect to design something that really uses that space well and is sort of in line with the vision that Green Meadow is moving towards as far as outdoor nature-based play, getting kids outside more often, and really using the space well. So kind of all of those pieces are kind of fitting into this project. So the reason I'm here today, first of all, is just to let you know that that is going on, because I know I've had individual conversations with people, but to make sure that everyone's kind of aware and up to speed, like where we are currently on the project, to see if you have any questions on it. Also to ask for your formal support as we're applying to the Community Preservation Commission, and that kind of comes in two pieces. So one is a letter of support, so that we can go to the CPC and say, it's not just a group of parent volunteers, really is the whole, excuse me, the whole school community and the school committee that's in favor of this project and supports it. So that's kind of the first piece. The other piece that I think this would make a really strong statement of support is if we can put money from the school department towards this project. I think that's going to make a really strong statement to the CPC saying, not only do we have a letter of support and verbally we agree that this is a good idea and we support it, but we're really willing to put the backing of the school budget behind it. So those are the two requests that I have tonight, and I also want to see if anyone has any questions on the project.
I'm just curious, Leslie,
Yeah.
what is the, when you talk about the other, kind of doing the nature, the outdoor play space, I'm just wondering what's possible. I know it's not set in stone, but what is that?
There's a lot that's possible, and we're working with an architect who's designed those kinds of playgrounds in the past for schools and also for community centers and parks and those kinds of things. So she would probably be better to answer that. Yeah, so like I said, we've done some research, and it's interesting, we were looking through some of the social emotional of the brochure that I came and stole off the table, and thinking about, how critical it is for kids, especially the Green Meadow, kids at all ages, it's important that they're getting outside and they're playing and they're learning about their natural environment and that sort of thing. Especially if we think about our youngest kids and having that time for them to go out and be creative and learn about the place where they actually live and do it in a way and with equipment and materials and a space that allows for their creativity and flexibility in play are some of the things that we're talking about. But we don't have a final design yet. We hope to have one soon, and then we'll come back to the community with a few different design elements to get feedback, but we're kind of in the beginning part of that process. But if you have specific suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
It sounds fabulous.
How old are the current structures?
The current structure was built, I've heard 1998, 1999. So somewhere in that ballpark, 16, 17 years old. And was my understanding, and it's been discussed a little bit, but my original understanding was that it was actually built for the grades 3 to 5, when Green Meadow used to be a K to 5 school. And then there was another playground, an old wooden structure in the front of the building that was really for the K to 2 kids.
Right.
I mentioned that during my presentation last year, and then it sort of was discussed that we weren't totally sure if that was accurate. And I wasn't really able to find out a good answer. We do have a playground inspection report that was done last fall, I believe, about a year ago. And I think in that report, I believe she mentioned some of the equipment not being appropriate for the K to 3 age group. We do know that adding a couple hundred cubic yards of mulch has helped to make some of the equipment a little bit more accessible and to make it a safer space, so it's good to just, by raising the ground up. But we know that our kindergartners certainly can't reach a lot of the equipment that's out there. So. And then we have that big structure that's the one that keeps breaking every few months. I think it's just the plastic just starts to get old, and after all those years of freezing and thawing and hardening and softening, it just started to crack all over the place. So.
What is? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So right now, is it just kind of in the works as far as the architect is drawing up plans, or they've done the drainage study, or I guess what's the kind of current status?
Yeah,
of
so
right
we've
now?
done the topographic survey, which the architect is going to use to design her plan. So we did have 2 meetings last spring, actually one with faculty and staff, including Excel staff, because we know that they use that space a lot, before and after school and in the summers. So, and then we had one with parents and community members to kind of provide some input. So she has some design ideas. We have that survey that we did now a year and a half ago. She's met with the committee a few times. So she has all of those ideas. And now that the topo survey was just done just before Thanksgiving, she's able to take that and really kind of design for the space. And we've walked it with the engineer, and so they have an idea of what we'll need to do to address the drainage and how we can get water to flow in appropriate places and where the storm drainage sewers are and that kind of thing. But she's just really in the beginning stages of actually putting that on paper.
Okay, so the idea is to keep it where it is right now?
Yes.
As far as site-wise?
Yep.
And then, it's probably too early to tell, but probably the cost, I'm sure, it's too soon in the process to have any guess at what the total cost would be?
For the whole project, we're estimating somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000.
Okay.
So that's including what do we need to do to remediate the drainage, if we need to level, if we need to put gravel and pipes underneath the play structure. The single biggest component of that is actually resurfacing the play space. So to make an accessible playground, we really need to have that rubberized surface or rubberized tiles or something like that. So wood fill is considered ADA compliant. But anyone with a kid or anyone in a wheelchair or braces or crutches or any of those kinds of things, walking on the wood chips or whatever it is, they're not able to do that.
Right.
And there's also lower maintenance costs if we rubberize the surface. So if we do it well right now, but to do that is going to be $60,000 to $80,000.
Sure.
Just for the space where the equipment is right now.
Gotcha.
So I think the Fowler one was about $50,000. Just to rubberize.
Right.
Exactly. So we're talking about a bigger space here. So 60 to 80 is what we've heard. Okay. Just for that piece.
Thank you.
I just had a question. So I know that we're also doing the traffic study of Green Meadow. Are we pretty much saying that the playground is staying where it is?
Yeah.
And I have no problem with that.
Well,
I just want to
Aaron's been a liaison for both, and so I think there might be a few, maybe 10 or 20 feet that could be in question, but other than that, the playground's staying there, and there's some pretty neat things going on with the traffic study, too. Aaron invited me to a meeting that was wonderful.
We have some early concepts really show only, intrusion of maybe a few feet, like Dr. Curry said, of the buffer of the possible roadway going where there's an existing path between where the playground is and this path parking lot, kind of expanding that into a roadway where it lives in the Tiger Drive, but that would really be the increase in encroachment on the existing playground area.
Gotcha.
The rest of the traffic study really focused on the parking lot, the adjacent parking lot to Crow Park, that open space, the old skate park, and the wooded area near the kindergarten.
I like to call it the future ice skating park. I don't know if I think I'm alone in that, but.
No, I'm with you on that. I'd like
right?
to see that.
Kids love those trees. They do that.
So can you also just speak to sort of where they are in the CPC process? I know that's always fun, the calendar of CPC,
Do you want me to address that, or?
whoever wants to.
So the CPC has received, first, so Leslie talked about two phases. The first phase was a $50,000 grant that was approved at town meeting. That was for what's going on. The second phase application that Leslie and her team put together is for $150,000, which rounds out to the $300K. And those are rough round numbers that they have based on preliminary estimates and whatnot, which is part of the reason why, we're coming here to make sure that you guys support it. Plus, the CPC doesn't necessarily have $150,000 to put towards this, as well as all of the other projects that have come to the CPC. So we are looking to have, matching funds. That is always beneficial for the CPC to have matching funds come in to, supplement, so that the CPC is supplementing a school project, which is really kind of the intent of CPC funds, particularly when it comes to open spaces and augmenting things like this. So right now, we are in the process where we're reviewing applications. Leslie has arranged for a site visit for the CPC Saturday at 11 o'clock at the school. So that's a posted meeting, public meeting for the CPC. We will be there at 11 o'clock along with, a host of people that Leslie has arranged to go over the property with us and review the merits of what they're doing and why it's important and whatnot. Because on the surface, if you're not an educator, if you haven't done the research and don't understand, you walk to the playground and you look at it, it's like, well, it looks great, it looks just fine. But we know that there are definitely deficiencies, so those deficiencies need to be explained and understood. And if you're like me and you come to pick your kid up and they're playing in the parking lot because they can't play on the playground, that's a problem. So that's part of the reason why I'm taking a certain vested interest in this as well. So there's lots of opportunity for the CPC to learn. The rest of the members of the CPC who may not have kids in the school and not see it on a regular basis, plus anybody else from the public who wants to get behind the project, and you guys are of course welcome to see. And I think having the school committee show their support in the presence of the CPC would be very beneficial, help putting a good case forward to make the proposal go forward, and then ultimately when it comes to town meeting, if folks at town meeting have a question about it, clearly the CPCs and the school committee is partnering together to make this work will be a valuable thing. It's a large chunk of money. It's not a small project. It's not a small thing, but it will have definite lasting effects for the town.
So we'll discuss after your presentation, sort of the letter and then funding and things like that. But just as far as when did CPC need a letter by? Let's say there's a commitment to it.
That's a great question, and I wish I had a better. So we need to have. It all is a matter of when we need to get recommendations to town meeting, get the warrants to town meeting. I believe we have public hearings in February.
So this is for annual, not the special in January.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're not completely, okay.
So we have time, but we don't. We want to get this thing out there. So
Oh, sure.
Get it through.
I just more or less don't want to miss a deadline. So if we support it, what are the deadlines that we need to be aware of more than anything else? So, okay.
Yeah, for annual in May.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think February time is when we have the public hearings.
Mhm.
That's what I remember.
So that would be, to have it in hand for the public hearings would be outstanding.
Right. Okay. More questions? Yep.
No, I think it's a wonderful project. I did go to the staff visioning session, was really excited by the architect and some of the ideas that came up. And it clearly supports the stuff we've been talking about around social and emotional learning. So, I think we should, I would like to recommend that the school committee definitely write a letter of support and figure out what we can do financially. So I'm supportive of it, but.
Thank you to you guys for all the time. I'm sure it's been a ton of time doing this. Really appreciate that.
So I have been involved with this before being a school committee member, so I have to recuse myself from a vote. But I can say that it's been a lot of time, and Leslie has just continued at it, to really keep moving it forward, and to your credit. And I think that it would be great to see this built while the people who have been involved with the project still have children. If that is possible.
Well, thank you, and I do want to say, I mean, I'm here tonight, but there really is this core group of 6 or 7 volunteers who've really been doing this for the year and a half that I've been doing it. So it's definitely not me, and I've gotten support, at town hall, from the school department, from, Green Meadow itself. So it does really feel like it's something that the community is behind. And this really is a community effort. So it's exciting. I agree. My daughter's now in 2nd grade. If we can build this up before she leaves.
You have another daughter.
Before she leaves Green Meadow.
Well, and I think the key, for me at least, because I wasn't here, I don't think last time around, is it's a phase 2. So there certainly has been a phase 1. There's been support not only from CPC, the parents, the volunteers, and everyone, but there was also support at town meeting, which I take very seriously. So if folks voted for it once, I look at this as, to me, I'm sometimes clear cut. Do I need to stop this project? Or, because there's so much support for it, so I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but a lot of people have already sort of spoken on the project, so.
And they were clear that was a phase 1 at that time.
Right, so I mean, I'm certainly in favor of moving forward with a letter of support for phase 2. It seems like it's well thought out. I mean, it sounds like all the stakeholders are involved, and there's a lot of great communication about it, so personally, I'm ready for a motion, but my opinion is that I would support a motion in that, so. But.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and like you said, we made a commitment to Leslie's group and also the Community Preservation Committee last year when you guys presented. We made the commitment to support you then, so I don't see any reason why we would pull out now.
Okay. So I will move to authorize Bob Girardi to write a letter on behalf of the school committee in support of phase 2 and appropriately worded with our support and thanks and all that good stuff. Motion has been made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? 3, with 1 recusal. Very official.
She knows the law.
Very official.
She knows her law.
So now to the less fun portion of the request. Leslie, feel free to sit down. Just sort of funding. So, I'll just open it up to sort of members to talk about funding and where their thoughts are. I've got some thoughts, but I just don't want to lead every time we have a new topic, so.
I'd like to ask Pete, since Pete is the resident expert, I'd start with asking Pete where, I don't know if you guys have talked about this kind of behind the scenes or thought about it at all, but where possibly we could squeeze the money out.
Okay, it's really premature tonight. I think what we need to do, we have a budget subcommittee scheduled for next week. I would assume this certainly would be a topic of discussion, along with a little bit later tonight. We are going to be talking about some information that I put together in preparation for the budget process to give you kind of an idea where we're starting from. So I think what we need to do is look at where we are, what we have available, and include this in the whole mix along with everything else we're going to be talking about, and trying to prioritize where we're going to be, expending, funds. It's clear to me, I think to everybody, that FY17 is going to be a tough year financially compared to the last several. So we just need to make sure that the decisions that are made fall in line with all of the priorities that need to get done.
So in terms of not knowing the number, and I'm not surprised we don't have a number tonight, knowing all the complexities of the budget and where we are in the process, does a number need to be, if a number were to come out, which I don't know, because honestly, the budget's very tight, would that need to be in the letter, or is that something we can communicate along in the process?
I think the letter included, an indication that you are going to consider financially supporting this. That would be helpful at this point in time. As the CPC deliberates on it, I know that would be an important factor to them, from having sat in previous meetings, and even if you recall from the last year's discussions about, where we were with the Fowler Playground and phase 1 of the Green Meadow. That was an important point to them from the last discussion. So knowing that you guys are actively pursuing coming up with some fiscal support would be helpful in the letter, and then as we get closer to the February, the new year, whatever, what that number ends up being, probably as Leslie gets more information and the architect provides some better numbers, because, unfortunately, because of things just not happening as fast as we had hoped in phase one, I think we don't have as strong numbers, as precise numbers as we'd like, as certainly as you would like when you're making any budget priority decisions. Squishy round numbers are not helpful when you're working on a budget. So, sharper numbers would help you make a decision, a better decision. And then, obviously it'd be nice if we could have a dollar-for-dollar matching. We could set up like a matching grant type scenario where the school committee funds and the CPC matches, has some match involved in there.
So I guess my question is, maybe we should check with the town administrator. We should find out what the deadline is to get you the letter so that you can get moving. And the question is, does it take us maybe a budget subcommittee meeting and another school committee meeting in early December to figure out what the number is? Would you prefer the separate letter just saying the school committee already voted to support it and now they're analyzing their budget, and then a second letter that says after analyzing their budget they're going to contribute X? Or would you want to wait and just have one letter? You want the first letter, I can see already. So we'll get that going.
And only because I also know, CPC is deliberating on this right now.
Okay.
We have the site visit coming up this Saturday. So I think
Okay.
the sooner that we have a letter really just at least demonstrating the support of the school committee, I think that's going to really help us.
So that's good.
Keep the momentum going in your application.
Okay.
And I think
Okay.
a statement that,
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
Knowing the CPC, I don't disagree with that.
and I think it makes sense to have a statement that, we're not beginning, but we're sort of in the middle of our budget review process, and this is certainly something that, as the school committee is supporting it, that we're going to certainly look for ways to see what we can come up with. So, you'll word it much more eloquently than I ever will. But I think that that's good. And then as we find out some more things on our end and on the town's end as far as funding, I'm certainly happy to come to a CPC meeting and sort of relay the will of the school committee and things, along the way. But I'd like to get the letter out as soon as we can, if that makes sense with everybody.
Other than the site visit meeting Saturday, our next CPC regular meeting is on the 16th.
Okay.
I personally won't be there, that'll be on business travel, but obviously you're more than welcome to come and speak at that meeting.
Okay.
Come speak on that. Obviously, they're always public meetings, so you don't have to wait for the public hearing to,
Is that a standard 7 o'clock?
yes, in the basement of the town hall.
Always a good time.
It is.
I meant the basement of Town Hall, not CPC. just to be
Oh, I know CPC.
clear. Anything else for the,
I don't really know.
Aaron, I'm sorry.
Just one note for the timeline. I had a call with Studio 9 Lane, which is a design firm, last week, and worked out an anticipated schedule based on town meeting deadlines and procurement and then those design development package is going to be due to us February 13th. So I would say between, and then the final conceptual design plan presented to us on January, so I'd say between that long time frame is when we're probably going to have a closer number of what our final design and construction costs are going to be for the application with CPC.
Great.
And then they come bring a letter, come up with the final number.
I'm sorry, is that just for the traffic study or for the?
No, that's for the, this is for the design for the playground.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Which is also, we are pursuing some private foundation grants and other fundraising opportunities, and many of the grants that we're seeing, they have, because they plan on people building playgrounds in the summer, their grant deadlines are usually somewhere in the January to March timeline. When they're due, when we find out, I don't know, but it'll all kind of be happening at the same time.
Great. Aaron, while you're here, I just want to let you know how thankful we are that you removed the death cage at Green Meadow. The kids had really just gotten to the point where they could take it apart on their own and carry these really large pipes and swing them at each other, which caused a lot of problems. So you're really a town hero right now. So that was awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Cut the pipe down.
So, yes, pickup is a wonderful thing. So you see a lot with the kids and what they're capable of deconstructing. So that was really great. Thank you for taking care of that. People have wanted that for a long, long time. So that was really amazing to see come down.
I just, before we close, this it sounds like we might be, I just want to reiterate that Saturday at 11 o'clock, you're all welcome to come. I'd love to have you here. We will also have the engineer and the architect on here, so if you have specific questions that you want to ask them, or suggestions or things that you want to see happening in that space, that would be a chance to vendor your.
Well, so you're asking for just adults for that?
I am asking just for adults.
Just since you're on the playground.
Thank you. I know, it is, just because of the nature of what we're trying to do with that time.
We could stage kids getting hurt on things.
I think Ms. Dow's doing better. We like to stay in there, you can just get her replacement.
Yeah, right. Great. Well, if there's nothing else on this, we'll move along. Thank you guys so much. This has been, it's been amazing to see the work moving forward. This project's actually happening in one child's sort of lifetime per school now. Like, we're really making things happen. It's amazing. So, yeah, no, thank you. So next up on the agenda is the sixth China North American Education Program. I'm not sure about the sixth, but sixth annual, I would say.
I thought it was the sixth annual, but they seem to do about 2 a year. So
Oh, okay.
It's just the sixth.
Okay. All right, sixth.
Third annual, I don't know if it works out. So thank you very much. I was honored to represent. Thank you. So I was honored to represent Maynard at the 6th China North American International Education Forum. This is something that was sponsored by BPEA, which is one of our vendors that we use for some of our foreign exchange students. We get some of our foreign exchange students through them. They have been gracious enough to invite several of our district staff. Dr. Girardi has gone, Principal Karajanis, Vice Principal Kevin Caruso has gone to speak at these conferences in the past, and the purpose of this, interestingly, similar to the first presentation tonight around the conference, is to really find out sort of what's happening across the globe and see what we can do better by learning from other people and what we're doing well, and that was very much a theme. So this is the these pictures aren't coming out very well, but this is the whole group that was there. I wish this were, I don't understand. Is that why that's happening? I suppose these pictures are just. So the conference setup was a 2-day conference where they had various speakers from China, Canada, and the United States. We were the only American school that was represented there, so that was very
Much
nice.
better.
Oh, that was
Better.
great. Yeah, it's just a contrast.
What was interesting is one of the first speakers that was there, it was a professor from UMass Boston, Wen Feng Yan, and he is the person who had introduced Maynard to VPEA several years ago. So it was, I didn't know he was going and speaking, and it was great to hear what he was saying. We were able to, he was talking about some of the things that the United States is doing, and cued me in on some pieces actually that are happening in Georgia that I'm really intrigued on about some of their career planning. One of the things that he was doing during his presentation, you see up here on the screen, is he talked about the U.S. News and World Report top 10 jobs, and he highlighted them as being all in the medical or IT field. One of the other pieces that referenced to me, and I mentioned it, I'll talk about it later when I get to my presentation, is that they all deal with people. All of these jobs require a lot of interaction with people, so various skills that are there. This was a professor from Taiwan, and he actually sang this song. It's apparently a Pete Seeger song, which I will not sing, and was not aware of as a Pete Seeger song. But he did a lovely job singing it. But his talk really focused on the idea that, you know, schooling and university, whether it's in university or at the pre-K through 12 level, should not be designed to sort of put, as it says, all the kids in boxes and have them come out all the same. And one of the things that China's doing right now is they're considering changing their Gaokao examination, which is their college, essentially their college entrance examination. Students take it after 3 years of high school, and they take it in certain areas. They can take it in math or science or history, for example, and then their scores allow them to attend university. And it is a very stringent exam. The better their score is, the better the university they're able to attend.